people do need to be heard and listened to and cared for, and I am absolutely an awesome person to do that, you know, I really am, but I can't be that to everybody. And sometimes we've really got to think about, you've got to have enough energy for yourself and for your own household, because if you're completely depleted, you're no good to anybody.
Hello and welcome to the Curl Squad's Curl Power podcast. I'm Zoe Fox, and in today's episode I am really happy to be introducing you to Annika Spalding. Now, she is a Midlands-based award-winning writer and creative mentor. She helps women who are battling overwhelm while trying to find their voice. She uses her platform to share her own personal experiences of anxiety, trauma and self-love, and she is just phenomenal at creating safe spaces for others to know that they're truly not alone. And she's always stood out to me as a really authentic voice, and on Instagram at times, you know, it can be quite a superficial platform, but she just comes with the realness, and I think you're really going to enjoy what she has to say. We spoke about the creative process and writing a book. We discussed refining your message, establishing boundaries as an empath, raising daughters, and we also spoke a bit about the benefits of journaling, amongst other things. So let's get into the episode and hear what Annika had to say.
My next guest today on the Curl Squad's Curl Power podcast is the absolute legend. That is Annika Spalding. She is the Midlands-based author and writer and creative mentor as well. So, Annika, thank you very much for coming onto the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so very excited just to be on your show.
Oh, bless you. Well, what I like to do is with each of my guests is just get into a little quick fire round of this or that and just see what your hair preferences are. Ready?
Ready.
Right. So, satin bonnet or satin pillowcase?
Pillowcase.
Hair up or hair down?
Hair up.
Edges natural or edges laid?
Natural.
Wash day, is it a chore or is it a vibe?
A vibe.
Go on. Volume or definition?
Volume.
Day one hair or day three hair?
Day 3.
Diffuse or air dry?
Air dry.
Do you have any certified go-to products or accessories for your hair?
Yes. Well, yeah. So at the moment, because I change my products a lot. At the moment, I'm using this range called Lotta Body. I quite like that. I use the leave-in conditioner quite a lot on my hair, and they've got like the co-wash, the shampoo, the conditioner, and all sorts really. Because in my household, we've got different curl types, so some of the heavy products won't work on my hair, but it works beautifully for the girls' hair. I used to really love Cantu, but it didn't agree with my hair last year.
Yeah, do you think something in that recipe changed perhaps? Because I noticed a difference.
Yeah, my hair went really weird and really light and delicate, like even more so than it is. It felt really fragile. So I just stopped using it, and I stopped using it on the girls because, it was not working for me.
Yeah, if it don't feel right, keep it moving. That's what I say.
But I get a subscription hair box. I get so I try different stuff all the time, which is really good.
Yeah. That's what I love about these product discoveries is like, you just get to try loads of things without necessarily committing to one thing. What about when you were growing up? Did you have any curl icons?
No. No, I did not, because I wasn't surrounded by anyone who even looked like me. Certainly wasn't surrounded by anybody with curly hair. I'm mixed race. I grew up in a family that was mostly white, so there was no one to look to or admire, or and the mainstream media then was probably a lot different to what it is now. So it's not even like looking on TV and seeing yourself represented anywhere. So there was no, I did not. It's not your fault, but no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did that feel, not being able to see yourself represented? Did you notice? Were you consciously aware, or was it something that just sort of seeped into your psyche?
I noticed when I went to school and I was called not so nice names. And I noticed then that I was quite different. It's quite weird because you don't notice until someone else does. When you're a child, you just think you don't, it's not something you think of really. And then my mum used to say, people pay lots of money to get hair like yours, the curly perm, or to get a skin colour like yours and all those things there. So it was tied in with that. But it wasn't until I was much older that I really felt like I could do something about it. And of course, being a mum of 2 children whose hair is quite different from mine, I didn't want them to have the same feelings that I did and not feeling connected to it at all. It felt like quite a responsible. It felt like I had to take responsibility then, because of course that was my experience as a child. But do I want my daughters to have that relationship with their hair and feel like they're not represented anywhere and feel like nobody understands them or they're not surrounded by people who look like them? I don't know if that answered your question, but I could just rant about this all day really, because it wasn't given to me, it wasn't provided for me, the time wasn't there. But as a mother, I've been proactive about learning and providing that for my children.
That's very much what this conversation is about. Is I've met so many people through the natural hair sort of world, and we always start these conversations off on hair, and then there's just these stories, these backstories of people growing up and how they engage with the society that they saw around them, and then how that's impacted us growing up. So whether you're black, whether you're mixed race, we've all got our own stories to tell, and the common thing that connects us is usually how we're received by society. And so you grew up in Birmingham or Midlands?
Mostly Birmingham, until I was 10. Then I moved to Yorkshire for like 6-7 years, and then we moved back.
So what was that like in Yorkshire? Because I know my husband's family's from York.
It was very different. My experience of it is that it felt quite segregated, and where in Birmingham I feel is a very multicultural, diverse city, everybody mixes. You'll have like your areas that are predominantly one community, but it just feels like a lot more togetherness here. But that wasn't necessarily something that I felt growing up in Yorkshire. But I loved it there for the outdoors and the big fields and the quarries and the walks. It's brilliant for that, and like even the architecture of buildings, if you're into that sort of stuff, I quite loved it for that. And of course I was a teenager there, so I had friends, I had a little bit of a life there. When you're 16, it all, you have your life, don't you?
Yeah.
So it took some time to adjust coming back here, but I'm a Brummie at heart, and I think I would live in other places. I'm not tied to this place, but this place is home.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what that's like, sort of going from somewhere more diverse. And I don't know what part of Yorkshire you're in, but I know that it's probably in certain places significantly less diverse. Did you have to change? Did you go from one environment where it was more diverse into a place where it wasn't, or were you still in quite a diverse part of Yorkshire?
I lived in Bradford. I don't know. I don't know about the question, only because I think really it's about where I felt like I fit in. But sometimes me feeling like I fit in and belong and be part of the environment has been more about me than it has been about other people. If that makes sense. I think I don't know what it's like up there now. I haven't been there for a very long time. And I've always found it really easy to make friends. But yeah, it was just different. But I'm biased. I'm a Brummie, so this this city's always going to be like, yeah, but it's better.
Yeah, just feels right, doesn't it, when you go back
Yeah.
home and it's where you come from? There's just something comfortable about it. And
Yeah.
I've got my own experience of growing up in Brum, and despite how diverse it was, I still found my challenges sort of like finding my place and how to fit in there. So I always find it interesting to see how other people experienced it as well. So in terms of hair care, when you were growing up, who was solely responsible for doing your hair as a kid?
My mum, but then that changed when I think I must have got to like 8 and I was sick of her pulling my hair with the brush, and I decided to do it myself. And she let me, so heaven knows what I would have looked like at school. But she had a go, she did.
Bless her. Yeah, it takes a little bit of I don't know, it's just a bit of a journey, isn't it, to get to a point where you feel comfortable enough to do your own hair, or it gets to a point where your mom's done your head in enough, literally, that you've got to take it into your own hands. Because my mom was, what I think you'd call heavy-handed with the hairbrush, so I much prefer it when my dad took control.
Yeah, exactly that.
So tell us a little bit about your journey into becoming an author and a writer, and where the passion stemmed from.
Well, it's very cliche in the sense that I always loved reading, always loved stories from a very young age, loved English, loved writing stories, loved reading stories, loved Enid Blyton, wanted to be a writer from a very young age. And then as I got older, I've always journaled, and that's been a really great way of letting out my thoughts and my emotions, because for a long time I didn't talk about it with anybody, didn't trust people, didn't feel safe enough. There was lots of stuff going around, so even if I'd had the words, there would have been nobody that I would have felt that I could trust. And then there came a point where I was just really ready to but with the first book, it took me a few years to write it on and off, but it became one of those goals where I can actually do this. Wow, let me just see what happens. And at the point that I published that book, I'd begun my journey around self-care and, really looking at myself and my life, and it just felt so empowering to finally achieve something that I really didn't know I was actually going to do. And I've just got so much to say and so much to explore with my writing that, for some people, they may look at me and feel, she's done so much, she's accomplished so much, she's successful or whatever. But for me, I'm still just kind of finding my feet, because there's so much that I create now that 5 years ago I didn't know that I was capable of. And I'm just really intrigued, really. I just want to explore and I want to say more. And if I can get outside of my head for long enough, I want to write a few more books, really, and reach a few more people.
So what's the thought process as you're thinking about becoming an author, you've got an idea for a book. How do you set about actually putting that into practice and to having enough discipline to get it done?
Well, for me, it was less so about I want to write a book, but more so I want to tell a story. Because I think if we sit down at a laptop and say, right, I'm going to write a book today, it's really overwhelming. Or if you think I'm going to write a book this year, it's overwhelming. But if you just say to yourself, I want to tell this story, and then it's about writing it until you feel like you've said everything that you need to say about that story. Because often what I find is, when people have asked me about writing, is how many pages should it be? How many words should it be? How thick should it be? There could be some really thick books out there that are absolutely rubbish, uninspiring, boring, forgetful. And then there might be other books that might be 50 pages long that could literally change your life. And I feel like we can get so drawn up in the word count and the page number and less so about the actual content. So for me, it's a case of, when I've sat down to work on a project, a lot of my thought process has been about, what do I want to say? So my first book it started as a short story of this woman that was just giving up on life because her marriage had turned out to be something that she never expected. It was abusive and she had no fight left in her. And it was a short story, probably less than 1,000 words. And it was like that for about 2 years. And one day I thought, well, what if she didn't give up? What if she got out of that bath and thought, actually, let me get dressed and let me think, he's coming back soon, let me have a plan. What if she didn't give up? And so that book came about because I wanted to see what would happen if she said she was going to the shop and she never came back and she got back on the train to Brum. Do you know what I mean? And so really, when you're writing anything, it's like, what is your message? Which feels like such a cliche thing to say. But if you were to write a book, Zoe, if you were to write a book and I was to read that as somebody that didn't know you, but you wrote that book for someone like me, if I was to put that book down, what would be that one thing that I know because I read your book? And it's thinking like that. And it's about, okay, so if the one thing that you wanted me to know as your reader is never give up, then it's about planning your content around that. How can I say never give up in all these different ways? So it's like an experiment, really, isn't it? It's like an experiment, really, and just saying what you need to say, and just you stop and you finish when you've done that.
Yeah, because I can imagine you'd have to sort of figure out how to make it concise, because when I write, I just get into it, and I'm like, how much of this is just me expressing, how much of this is a necessary part of the message? So what's your process for refining that?
Well, what we have to do in the first instance is write a really awful first draft. So the way that I look at it is you get the idea out onto paper. Don't even care about the format, if it's spelt right, if you've repeated yourself, just get it all out so you know what it looks like. When you know what it looks like, then you're in a position then to edit it and to do something with it. So that means then you can go back and you can edit it and reorder it. Sometimes, and there are writers that do this, people will edit as they go, but I feel like that slows us down. I feel like, how can we know what we're working with until we've seen it all in full? Because you might say to yourself, I'm going to write this book and it's going to be a self-help guide, but actually when you've written it all down and you've read it back, it feels more like a memoir, or it feels more like a collection of poetry, or it feels more like a novel, or do you know what I mean? You don't know what you're working with. So for me, the way that I've written my books, particularly with my last one, is I got it all out. I got like the main points out first, and then I went back and it's like you create the skeleton for your book and then you flesh it out with more words. So the magic really is in the editing, because then you can go back and it makes sense as well once you've written the skeleton of it. Like, just to take like regular breaks from it and then come back and then edit it so it's like fresh pair of eyes. So it is a process, and it's not a quick process, but it should take time because you're crafting something that's important. Like, you've put your time into this and you want people to read it and really get it. So just like have like verbal diarrhea on the page first, get it all out, and then you're in a really great position then to like curate it in the way that you want it to be read.
So as with anything creative, it's quite difficult to know, or it's quite difficult to say, right, okay, the baby is ready now to release into the world. How do you know when you've got it to that point where you're like, okay, let's go?
Well, for me, when I wrote, for example, with my other books, I was really just wanting to keep the momentum of being a writer, really. With my last two, it was really about, okay, I've said everything that I needed to say. Do I need to add anything in here? And I'd read it so many times, and I couldn't think of anything more that I could add. So then for me, that was okay, then it must be ready. That was it. And even then, it's just making peace with what this book is. So my last book was a memoir. It's by no means a biography. You know, I'm 34. I haven't lived my whole life yet. There's probably loads more I could have added to it, and there's loads more left of life to live for me to create another book. But the purpose of that book really was just to talk about the healing journey. So when I read through it so many times, I asked myself, am I being true to what I want this to be? Is it a healing journey? Does it read as that? Have I gone off on a tangent? Does it make sense? And when I could answer those questions, yes, then I felt like, okay, so then we're done, then we're ready. That's pretty much it.
So when you're writing and you're telling your story and you start thinking about sharing some intimate and personal details about what you've been through, something that I come up with is like, am I oversharing? Where do I draw the line? And what's the benefit in being so authentic and transparent? How do you manage all of that?
Well, I write about stuff that I don't mind being asked about in an interview like this, because on occasion I have been a guest on a podcast or on radio, and I do lives. So if I've put it out because I don't mind talking about it, and it's not of detriment to me either, because there is a balance, because I am worried sometimes when people do share, because it's like, why are you sharing? So for me personally, and also it can be quite triggering when you share as well. It can be quite a lot. So it's really important that you have a good support network around you, because you might have shared something and you might feel okay, but as a result of you doing that, somebody sent you a message and that set you off now. And I've had a lot of counselling over the last few years. I've been on and off antidepressants. I have some really great coping mechanisms now to help me manage my anxiety, to the point where I've not needed the antidepressants to feel like I can cope with my day. And also it's about me being really clear in what my boundaries are. So how can I take care of myself, because I can control what I share, but not necessarily what somebody else feels like they can share. So it's a case of, do I have any rules around how I use social media? So am I saying to people, DM me anytime if you need support? You know, and it's just been really clear in that I only share what I'm willing to talk about, and I only share what I've talked about in counselling. And also that if my children were older and stumbled across stuff on the internet, that I wouldn't mind them finding out in that way. But also when we share our personal experiences, oftentimes there are other people who are part of those experiences. Somebody did something to you, or something happened to you because of a choice somebody else made. And so a question to myself is, whose story am I telling here? Is this my story, or am I using somebody else's experience to validate my point? And so it's been really honest about that, because on any of my platform, on any of the platforms that I use, or even in the memoir, it could have been really easy for me to say, and this person did this, and they slept with this person and did this, but actually that's not my story, is it? That's their behavior. And so it's really worth thinking about. And also, you don't have to share like all the dark corners of your life to connect with people. It's just a choice that I've made, and as a result of that, it's what people tend to know me for anyway. But I'm comfortable with that. So if you do it, it should be because that's something that you want to do. You feel like you've got support around you. If it feels like it gets a bit much, there's purpose in it. But also, like, you're taking a real good care of yourself while you're doing it, because people will reach out, people will connect with you. And it's about knowing what you're going to do when people do that.
Yeah, because I suppose if you're putting yourself out there as having been through certain things, and people see you as a relatable character, then you are predisposing yourself to being put in a situation where people are going to bring their stuff to you. And I heard something the other day where somebody said, in terms of like sharing personal things and difficult stories, is like, have you grown through it, or are you still going through it? And I thought, you know what, that's a really good way of looking at it. Because if you're still going through it, there's a chance that you need to sort of take that time to process for yourself, so you're not trauma dumping on everyone as a form of therapy. How important do you think it is to have been through some sort of therapy, or perhaps consider going through therapy if you're thinking about wanting to share about yourself? Is it necessary?
I mean, it can't hurt. I love therapy, but I've been many times. I'm like, yes, there's a whole person here who just paid just to listen to me for an hour and not judge me. I think it's worth exploring, because actually you're going to share some really vulnerable stuff to an audience who are going to respond in all manner of ways. I feel like we owe it to ourselves, if we want to be vulnerable in that way, to speak to somebody who can handle it in a way that feels safe and it feels understood, and this person's given us empathy. They've not judged us, because this is my thing with disclosing stuff that's personal and that's happened to you, or whatever your experience has been, is that if you do it for the first time and you have a really horrible reaction, it's going to stop you from doing that, and it's going to make you feel ashamed. You have you don't need to be ashamed, but it's going to make you feel like that. And it's where you started to bloom and blossom, you're going to be drawn in, and that shouldn't be your first experience. It's not right. And this is why, for me, I mean, personally, sometimes I'm that first person for somebody, and so it's really important to me to always give that positive, supportive, empathetic response. Yeah. because I know I'm in control of me, and I know what it feels like when you've opened up to somebody and they've made you feel awful afterwards. But if the first time you open up is to the public, you can't control the kind of response you're going to get, or not that you should, but you don't know how you're going to feel. You don't know how. I don't know. I feel like if you're going to share anything that's potentially triggering, I feel like you should have a good support network in place. And I don't think it's a bad thing if part of that support network is a therapist, even if you only go to a couple of sessions, and you may not even talk about the stuff that you want to talk about online, but perhaps sitting in those sessions has given you some really good coping mechanisms to try.
As an empathetic person, how do you establish your own personal boundaries? Because I know, as a fellow empathetic person, it's quite hard at times to be able to just draw a line in order to protect your own self and your own energy. So how do you manage that?
Well, it used to be really hard when my boundaries were really bad. But now what I've got to remember is it's not my job to fix everybody. People aren't broken. People are hurt. People do need to be heard and listened to and cared for. And I am absolutely an awesome person to do that. I really am, but I can't be that to everybody. And sometimes we've really got to think about, you've got to have enough energy for yourself and for your own household, because if you're completely depleted, you're no good to anybody. And so for me, I have to take some responsibility, because I'm here with my daughters and I want to make sure that I give the best version of me to them. That means nobody else gets to drain me. Do you see what I mean? And it's so when people do approach me and people do share stuff, it's about not trying to counsel them in that moment, because that's so easy to do. I used to be a family support worker, and I've worked on helplines and I've worked in refuge, and it would be a very natural way for me to start asking those questions, and that little part in me that says, okay, you know the answers, Annika, you've got to fix them. But no, sometimes it's a case of signposting, really, and just saying, have you thought about this? This might be a really good place to look. Or have you thought about speaking to your doctor? And not trying to take the role of a paid professional as well, because even though I have these skills and this experience, I'm not a counsellor, and I'm not a therapist. I'm not a support worker right now. So it's about recognising actually who's the best person for the role. And sometimes some people just need to vent. Some people actually don't need help. They just want to vent. They want to offload, and that's okay if you feel like you're in a space where you can manage that. But some people really do need more support, and it's about you recognising within yourself. Sometimes for me, it's like, okay, who's supporting you right now? Finding out, can you speak to that person? It's hard because people can take it quite personally, but I just feel like people will take, and they don't mean to, they're just going through a lot, and they've just found somebody who finally understands them. So of course it's like, all this stuff comes out, but you're a person as well, and so we have to really be responsible for saying, well, actually, no, I'm going to stop you there, just so and manage the boundaries that way. Otherwise people will just keep doing it.
Yeah, people will take as much as you're prepared to give, won't they? And it is really important to establish healthy boundaries, and that's something that I've had to learn the hard way as well. So I'm always interested to see how people manage that. I know that you are also a creative mentor. So tell me a little bit about how that came about.
Okay, so the creative mentoring. So at first I decided to be a writing coach, because I thought, I've written all these books, people always ask me about writing, boom, let me do this, right? I enjoyed it a lot, really. There were some aspects of it that I didn't enjoy, which is why I don't do it anymore, and also I wanted writing to be for myself. But because I've had so much experience over the years in terms of like attending and running events and workshops and blogging and writing books and public speaking and making a podcast and learning how to use Canva and building a little platform on social media, that's how we've met, and attending events. I feel like I've got like all this different experience that's just sitting here, and there are so many people out there that want to do some of this, that actually, why can't I give them a little bit of that? And with it, what I normally find, like somebody might say to me, oh, I'd like to start a blog, I want to write about this, but also that person might also be having a little bit of confidence issues as well. So you know what, let's just work through it all, because it all goes hand in hand. I know that. And so that's why I have the creative mentoring, because it's not necessarily about writing, really. There's someone who comes to me every now and then. She wants to look at how she's making time for self-care in her busy routine, and that works for her. Somebody else comes to me for planning, time management and planning stuff. So it really it really does vary, but it's more so because I just have so much to give on a wide range of stuff that I didn't want to say to myself, oh, I'm only going to help people with writing. You can't fit me in a box, because there's just so much there. And I feel like really there's what I bring is a creative approach, and it enables me to be in a position where I can kind of give people homework and guide them, but also having a bit of like a professional boundary. So like, we're doing this, we're having this exchange because you've paid me and I've agreed to work with you, and you've picked me because you feel like we would be a good fit, and let's work through this together and let's make progress. And I quite like it. I've made it really cheap and affordable, but that's only because I just feel like I know what it's like not to have a lot of money but want to do well. And you know, it's about making things accessible. But a lot of the people that I work with are women, and a lot of them are mums. So it's actually super awesome, because we might have a session about 8 or 9 o'clock and we're both in our dressing gowns and the kids keep popping in, you know. So I kind of like it for that it's a case of, you know, you're coming into a space where you're going to get heard and validated, but we're going to have a plan, we're going to move forward. And I'm saying to you, you've got amazing ideas. Yes, it might feel hard, but actually let's look at your time management, let's look at your routine, let's see how we can make it work. And just having that reassurance. And I feel like I would have loved someone like that a few years ago myself. That would have been awesome.
I was going to say, what do you think are some of the most common reasons that are preventing people from fulfilling their potential in your experience?
Well, first of all, I feel like they have the idea, but they're not convinced it can happen. There's a little bit of them is that thinks maybe, but they don't know the how. I think people think that you have to have like your whole life together to make this happen. Like, you've paid off your debts, you've got to the bottom of the laundry basket, you're doing a dream job, but you don't work too often, but you make enough money, you feel good in yourself, and now you can write your book. It doesn't work like that, you know. But I think when people they see people on social media and it all looks really fabulous and it's just highlight reel, you know, we know that. And I think people talk themselves out of it. But also I feel like sometimes we as creatives aren't really good at showing the process either, and aren't so good at showing the reality of it. You know, that aren't so good at showing that, you know, even though I'm delivering a workshop right now, I've just had a really stressful morning with my kids. Or, you know, maybe those who show up who are super happy every day aren't showing the down days. So people who haven't started their journey yet feel like, okay, this seems really unattainable. She's always happy in her stories. She's always happy all the time. I'm not like that. I can't be like that. So I feel like a lot of it is about misconceptions and messaging, really. You know, and this is why it's so important, I feel, to be real and just to say, you know what, this is how it can happen. It's going to be a bit challenging, but actually this is how it can happen. It will take time. A lot of the people that we see out there making their moves have been doing this for a while. And I think people forget that as well, you know. Even there's that saying, isn't there, people who you work 10 years to get your overnight success, and that's a reality out here.
10 years and the rest.
You know, so
yeah.
It's a lot of that, because I think a lot of success is glamorized, isn't it? This is how it looks, but actually it's a hard slog.
Yeah, it's what people don't see behind the scenes, isn't it? It's the stuff that's happening offline, the blood and the sweat, and well, hopefully not literally the blood and the sweat, but you know,
a little bit less of that.
Yeah, a bit less of that, but all of the stuff that goes into it all behind the scenes that nobody sees. And that's what I've always really respected about you, is just that you are just authentic and transparent, and I just really respect that. And I think that anybody who is fortunate enough to work with you is just really lucky to be taking on all of that experience that you've learned and that you've gained over the years. So have you got any sort of daily habits or rituals that you do to keep you on track and to keep you successful and sane?
So, well, sane's good, because sanity right now, it's like this. But I journal a lot. Sometimes I journal 2 times a day, 3 times a day, because I'm an overthinker, and because I have anxiety, and I know that if I allow myself to be overthinking, I will think myself into a state, then that will lead to depression. So for me, I know my process. So I know a good coping mechanism for me is to journal, get all the thoughts out. So I do that in the morning usually, because I've got like a head full of stuff then. It's really good to do before you go to bed, actually. So you're not laid there thinking. So I do that. I do a really short meditation that's for like 5 minutes. It's a guided one, and I've been doing that for a little while. But which I'm saying this, but then I'm remembering that I've been experimenting more recently with unguided ones, just some random ones on YouTube that are like 10 and 15 minutes long, and it's felt okay to do it. So I feel like if you're not used to sitting still for so long quietly, it's good to work up to it. That's what I do mostly. I'd like to say that I read every day, but I really don't. My brain's not settled enough right now to be able to do that. But journaling and the meditation is doing something for me, and getting a good amount of sleep, which is hilarious saying that as a mother, because my children are with me at every waking moment.
Yeah, a mother in a pandemic, like homeschooling and lockdown life.
But I've experimented this last week, and I used to be able to stay up really, really late, and kind of survive on like 5 hours sleep. It's not working for me now. And this week I've been off work, so I can have a bit of a lie-in. But even though I've stayed up late, I've still woken up early. So the new solution, the new plan is we go to bed before midnight, right? That is guaranteed to wake up feeling somewhat human. And if I'm lucky, wake up half an hour before the kids get up, which means uninterrupted journal time, uninterrupted meditation, and a cup of tea while in bed. Winning.
I love it. That is something that I'm trying to work on, but I haven't found the discipline yet to get up before Shola, because she's a bit of an early bird. But I'm like, just to have that half an hour before everything gets going, because over the last year, like, journaling has been my saving grace. I think it's really, really helped me and propelled my own journey, and something that I've done on and off over the years. But this year, well, over the course of the last year, I took it so seriously. That and meditation has just, it's really helped. And I think, you said about trying to do a longer meditation, and a lot of people get put off, don't they? And they're like, oh, sitting here like this, it's not right. But there's so many different ways that people can meditate, and it's just finding something that works for you, even if it's just sitting there for a moment and just observing your breath. You haven't got to sit there and stop your thoughts entirely. But a good way to sort of pair journaling and meditation is get all your thoughts out, write them all down, do a bit of journaling, then sit down and then do a bit of meditation. And it makes all the difference. You hear all these high achievers and successful people saying it, but for me, it's had a hell of a lot of benefit, and it's something that I definitely recommend that people just find their own way with it as well. You haven't got to do what other people are doing, just do what feels good.
It's about having that connection with yourself, and I feel like that's so important, especially with how the last year has been, and especially mothers in a pandemic, even more so, because it's like sometimes the only space you get is when you go to the loo, if you're lucky, and you might be able to do the food.
She's still in there when I'm on the loo, and the toilet cubicle's like that, and she's
or you might be able to do the food shop alone if you're lucky and you're blessed. And so it's like, actually, how can I find some peace in my day? Because granted, it's not going to be like it was. Let's not put it off until after it's all over. We don't know when that's going to be. So actually, how can I find a moment of serenity in the day? And it's never going to feel like enough, because it's not, but it's better than nothing, isn't it? Those 15 minutes that you might give yourself in the morning is better than no minutes at all, in my opinion.
We're in this social media age now, and we're talking about trying to find time in the day just to centre ourselves. As a mother, as you've said, of 2 daughters, How do you feel about the time that they're growing up in, and how do you help to manage their self-esteem with all of this social media and glamorization of everything?
Well, my children aren't allowed on social media right now. They are 8 and 11. They have they're allowed to look on TikTok, but they're not allowed to post on there. And we have an agreement where you see something that looks inappropriate or you're not sure, you speak to mummy about that.
Mm-hmm.
But my girls are quite good like that. I want to keep them off social media for as long as possible. Even as much as I love social media, I'm an adult woman. I didn't grow up with it. It's something that I've joined as an adult. So I'm not quite sure how it will impact them. And so for me, I want to have as long as possible to establish a really good level of self-esteem in them both, where they feel good, they feel validated, they know themselves, so that when the time comes when they do go on social media, because of course they will at some point, they've got that already. I feel like I just want to fill them up with as much feel good, but it's working, because I will say to them, you're amazing. They're like, yeah.
Love that.
So that will be their standard. I feel like as parents, we only have so much control, right? We only have so much control. So, it really is up to us to kind of set the bar, really, and really monitor what they're using and know the passwords and just monitor that and teach them as best as we can about safe internet use, and think about the stuff that we say about ourselves and our bodies and how we look and how we feel, because that's where they're learning it from. So that, as well. So we're reinforcing stuff, really. So it's a hard job. We can only control so much. So my hope is that I instill my girls with enough, so that when they do go on social media, that they might feel a little bit challenged, but they've got the foundation there where mommy said this, their life is like this. So actually this can't speak to that. This doesn't speak their truth. That's the plan, but ask me in a few years.
See how it goes. It's a constantly
Yeah.
evolving thing, isn't it? You just gotta do your best that you can in every day.
Yeah.
I know you said earlier you don't have much time for reading, or you're not doing much reading at the moment, but what are some of your favourite books or books that have impacted you?
I love Dorothy Coomson. Love her. I love the way that she writes, and her writing has progressed over the years, because it used to be more like chick lit, whereas now it's a little bit more like psychological thrillers, sort of, with a message behind it. But one of her early books was it wasn't Good Night Beautiful, it was My Best Friend's Girl, and it made me cry. And at the time that I read it, it'd been a few years since my mama had died, and I was just so numb and I couldn't cry. But she opened something up, and that's why I'll always love her, because it's a story, it's fiction, but I related so much that she was able to, with her words, I was able to have that release. And for me, that felt so important. I've loved her work ever since. I've met her and told her, I love you, because it just had that impact upon me. I really love Light is the New Black by Rebecca Campbell, which is a bit like spirituality. If you're getting into it, it's really good with that. It's got some really good exercises in it, and I love the way that she writes. I'm literally looking at my bookcase now. There's Homegoing. Have you read that?
No.
Homegoing by Gayasi. Amazing. It talks about it talks about like a, how to even talk about it. It's looking at like a timeline of a family torn apart by slavery, but each chapter is a person's story. It's just magical, so well written, beautiful. Read it and then we'll talk.
Yeah.
There's so many books, actually. I've got so many, but those ones definitely that I mentioned. I'm a bit of a writing snob, to be honest. And that's, I haven't always been this way, but I think my degree ruined a lot of stuff. It ruined my writing as well.
What's your degree in?
Creative and professional writing. There's also Purpose by Jessica Huey, which I read. I wish I'd read that at the beginning of my journey. It's very inspiring. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm literally looking at them all. I've got 3 bookcases in my house, and they're all full. They're all full of books. I think it's just really good just to be really interested in reading and just seeing what other people are reading. I like to know, I like to get personal recommendations.
That's basically the whole reason I'm doing this podcast, is just to see what everyone's reading.
It's not a bad plan.
Yeah, but like you, it's, you know, books tell stories and they impact people in different ways at different times. And I think it's nice just to get people's book recommendations, and it might spark something inside someone else that might help them in some way or transform them in some way.
Yeah.
So speaking of books and book recommendations, what have you got coming up?
But my books? Oh, well, I've just written. Well, I haven't just written one. I wrote my memoir, and I published it last year. It's called She Who Writes. I'm very, very proud of that piece of work. It's the one book that I can say that I've done that I'm like, yes, happy with that. And I'm kind of just getting into a space where I've got a new idea for a book. I kind of want to return to fiction. It's just having the headspace to do stuff, really, and trying to do stuff that feels true to me and not necessarily in response to what my peers are doing, or this is big now, so let's just do it. No, I kind of want it to be heartfelt. So I've got an idea for a story. I'm not going to talk about that just yet, but I'm going to write it first. And yeah, I just want to have fun with my writing at the moment. I just want to enjoy stuff, because it's felt quite hard to enjoy things for a while, which is why it's took me so long just to post on social media again and really show up there at the moment. But yeah, I want to explore stories, and I feel like I want to do something around journaling, but I mean, we'll see what happens.
I love it. Lots of possibility. Where can people find you? Not like literally.
Yeah.
Where do you live?
I'm all over the internet, quite literally. I'm on Facebook at Annika Spalding. I'm on Twitter at Annika Spalding, although I very rarely use it. I just use that just to look at what everyone else is saying. I'm on Instagram at Annika_Spalding. That is my favourite social media platform. I'm there more than I'm anywhere else, really. I do have a website, which is just my name.co.uk. But I would say Instagram's probably the best place, really and truly. But yeah, I'm on a lot of stuff.
And just to end the chat, what is your one bit of advice or your parting bit of wisdom, like whatever comes to your soul? What would you like to say to the people then?
Trust yourself. You know the answers. When you step away from social media, your friends, your partner, your family, what feels true to you, that's what you should listen to.
Love it.
So I hope you enjoyed that episode. I know I did. There's definitely lots that I can take away and implement. I think it's always good when we've invested our time and then we've got something to take away. So I might be thinking about doing that book. So thinking about boundaries and our discussion on boundaries, have you managed to establish healthy boundaries, or have you still got work to do? What can you do today to implement better boundaries for your own well-being? And if you are on Instagram, please come along and find us at the Curl Squad, or you can come and find me at my personal account, and that is at zoe.e.fox. And if you're an Apple user and you did enjoy the podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would slide on over and leave us a 5-star review if you believe it is 5-star content. And if you think it's anything less than that, I want to do better for you. So let me know how I can improve. Wicked. And it takes a community to build a great community. So I know all you people out there that are listening to this are good people. Do you know what I mean? So share it with your good people. Spread the good word of the Curl Power podcast. I'd really appreciate it. And on that note, I shall bid you farewell, wish you a good week ahead, and I will catch you same time next Tuesday. See you later, girlfriend.